at this point. You good?
Great.
You good?
I think so. Thank you, Ty. Good morning. Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Great. Sorry about that. I think I might have been one of the last classes to graduate from Pomfret before the cell phone thing emerged, so you get a little bit of my technological savviness here. Welcome. Happy reunion weekend. My name is my name's Laura Purse. I am class of 2003 and thrilled to be celebrating my 15th reunion. I have some classmates back there. Hello, everyone. This is my first time leading the Alumni Association annual meeting, and I'm thrilled to be here in front of you as president of the Alumni Association Executive Council. I care deeply about Pomfret and the school that it is today and my experience, but also about the alumni experience, and that's why I'm here. In case you don't know, as alumni, you have the good fortune of having a group of your friends and classmates who represent you and are your allies and advocates. The Alumni Association Executive Council, which I will refer to as the AAC from here out, so you don't have to deal with that mouthful, is made up of people just like you. We represent the needs and the interests of the alumni body everywhere, and we really work to improve the connectivity between alumni and alumni in the school. We are a body of 33 different alumni. We care deeply about Pomfret. We span 6 decades, 8 heads. We have 17 males, 16 females. Collectively, we attended over 100 events last year. Thus far to date this year, we've collectively attended 74. We love Pomfret and we care deeply about the school. You can see a little picture of us all. This slide is particularly important because in a couple of minutes I am going to ask you for some audience participation. But I wanted to introduce you to the leadership of the Alumni Association. I introduced myself as president. Dan Thompson, who is the class of 95, I do that all the time. He's not celebrating his reunion, should remember that. He is in his 2nd year as vice president. He lives down in the DC area. Mackie, my fellow classmate, is our outgoing secretary, and we are proud to have been a part of the leadership here. So let me tell you a little bit about a few of the things that we do. The changing jobs landscape was something that the students started to sort of identify as an area where they were having conversations with various adults, if you will, and kind of this understanding of the fact that there is a Pomfret network, and we were able to respond to that by putting together a program called Pomfret Career Expo. This has now taken place for 7 years. And it's an opportunity for alumni to come back to campus and share their professional experience and their sort of path post-Pomfret with the students here today. So this year we had 20 different sessions. We had 28 different alumni come back. And what I think is really fun is seeing the list of careers that the 5th and 6th formers were interested in this year. Another program that alumni have been involved in on campus is Project Pomfret. And Tim is going to talk a little bit more in depth about Project Pomfret, but to highlight this year in particular, it's a program that we've been sort of ramping up over the last few years, but I think we're able to do quite successfully this year. There were 23 different projects, and all 23 projects had at least one alumni consultant. And I think the majority of those projects were able to reach out and connect with those alumni consultants, and a lot of them had really fruitful conversations and meaningful contributions to their projects. This was a very moving day on campus. I had the good fortune of witnessing 5 alumni come back to Pomfret and share their experiences for Martin Luther King Day. John Eyrick is an AAC member. He's class of 1965, and he's also the first African-American Pomfret graduate who has been really active on our group as an advocate of diversity. And he a panel of classmates who came and talked about race at Pomfret in the 60s, both in an all-school panel, but then also in small group sessions with the students. One of the most important things that we do is we gather together. We gather together both on campus and weekends like this, but also off campus at various off-campus events. We work really hard to bring Pomfret to a community near you. You can see up here a couple of examples of events that have happened in the last year. We hosted a alumni and parent reception on Mount Desert Island over the summer. We have paddle parties on the North Shore of Boston and in Fairfield County that have become annual events and favorite opportunities for folks to get together. We had a really successful reception in DC this year, and we obviously hosted the sort of signature events, the Boston and New York holiday parties as well. This is just a small amount of all of the work that we're doing. There are additional projects and initiatives that our AAC group has been lending their talents to. I didn't want to get into all of them, but hopefully this gives you a good example of what it is that we are doing. So, since I know that I've inspired you in the last 5 minutes, and you're excited about getting involved, I thought I would share with you a little bit about what you can do. You can attend and host local events. You can come back to campus and participate in Career Expo, Project Pomfret, Pomfret Alumni Teach. You can volunteer as a class agent. Louisa Jones sends a wonderful weekly email to everyone who is a class agent, and I don't know who wouldn't want to receive that. And lastly, you can continue to keep Pomfret's legacy alive by donating to the Pomfret Fund. And Monday is a particularly exciting day that I think you're going to be filled in on a bit more in with the next presentation, so I will leave you with that. Something that I think are all aware of is how valuable the Pomfret network is. There are 4,700 friends out there, and we have been working on a career mentoring initiative for a while, but haven't necessarily had the platform by which to successfully connect fellow alumni to each other. So I'm really excited to introduce you to pomfretconnect.org, which is a virtual physical space where we can literally all be together at the same time. This is a great place to network, share job opportunities, and just generally stay connected. So I hope that you will take a moment to log on and log in and connect with all of your fellow alumni on here. The opportunities for not just friendship, but career mentoring are about to go to a whole new level. Okay, say it with me. Quasquicentennial. Out. Perhaps our most exciting project in the works is Pomfret's 125th anniversary. On October 3rd of this year, we mark the 125th anniversary to date of the opening day of Pomfret School. So it's the first day of school. So basically we're old, and it's time to celebrate that. So 1 year from today, we will all be reconvening back to campus and celebrating the 125th anniversary with a red and black gala. There will be a series of events happening both on campus and off campus throughout the year, and I hope you take the time to participate in all of them. Okay, so I told you we needed audience participation. I have the great honor of being able to present to you the nominees for the new Alumni Executive Council leadership. This is sort of the business portion of this meeting. I'm thrilled to present to you Jim Seymour, who's class of 1965 and a dear friend of mine, to be joining Dan Thompson as Vice President of the AAC. He's been on the AAC since 2011. He's volunteered for Pomfret Alumni Teach, Project Pomfret. He's been a career mentor as well as a career presenter. He volunteered on his 45th and his 50th reunions, and I am thrilled to nominate Jim for Vice President. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. Jim will be joining our slate next year. Our second nominee is Sarah Howie. She is class of 2009. She lives in Atlanta and will be replacing Mackie as our secretary. She has been a volunteer on the AAC since 2017, but she has single-handedly founded a alumni events chapter in Atlanta. She's also been back to campus to present as a career expo presenter and share her experience in investment banking and finance with the current students today. So I'm thrilled to nominate Sarah for secretary. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. So that concludes my presentation. It's now my honor to introduce you to Tim Richards and pass the podium over his way. He'll share with you some of the exciting things that are happening on campus. It's the work that Tim is doing at Pomfret today that makes me so proud to stand in front of you and do my work with the AAC. So I'm thrilled to pass it over to him.
That's good. Okay, thank you. How was everyone? Good to hear. Good to hear. I am just waiting for 1 minute while Melissa gets things. There we are. We're ready to go. It's really nice to have everyone here. I'm not sure how to do that. That was you. I am dealing with something right in here, so I'm going to apologize if I'm coughing during this. But it's my pleasure to welcome you all back this morning and to get a little bit of an update from me about what's happening in the school. Now, you all know just how much happens in schools, and the presentation, the material here is about 4 hours worth. So I hope that you don't mind plowing right through lunch and through athletics. And we'll have you out of here in time for dinner. To give you a full sense of the update, the scope of what is happening would take that much time. I will do my best to narrow that down. I stand up here humbled to continue to be a part of this school and this institution which has for almost 125 years been doing extraordinary things to prepare young people for college and then the world beyond college. I'm particularly mindful today that I stand here today in front of two of my predecessors, Brad Hastings and Jay Milner, legendary folks in their right, and I'm honored to have them in the audience today, so I welcome you. As I said that, Mr. Milner went, he gave himself a thumbs down, which I don't quite understand. I'll take it. So I'm going to try to give you a snapshot of pretty much everything, while also leaving some time for Q&A, because I think that's an important part of what we do. There is an awful lot happening at Pomfret School. These organizations are complex and complicated and evolving and organic, and I hope that what I share with you will give you insights on a whole bunch of different levels about what we're doing. So I start here with the purpose that we set out in a strategic plan that we established in 2013. The Pomfret Purpose was the name of that plan, and a number of people in this room were involved in putting that together. We modified at that time very slightly the mission, and I start with mission because everything we do at Pomfret comes back to mission. And we have become very, very intentional in the work that we do as a school to come back to mission. We come back to mission, and we come back to our values, we come back to the vision of the graduate, and we come back to the vision that we establish as an institution in that strategic plan as we're making decisions around program, as we're making decisions around finance. Are we living and are we making decisions that support the mission of the school? There's no question that the world is changing fairly rapidly. Admissions, finance, college counseling, pedagogy, it looks different from when you were here as students. It looks different from what it looked like when the fifth year reunion class was here 5 years ago. And so in this culture of global culture, but within schools, this culture that is changing so rapidly, I hope to spend a little bit of time sort of unpacking and helping you get a sense of what we're trying to accomplish, what we are doing for our students, and then to see if you have any questions. Does anyone know what this is called? No? It's a Wordle. A Wordle. This is a Wordle from our vision of the Pomfret graduate. So all of these words are words that are taken out of the vision of the Pomfret graduate that we established back in 2013. And this is essentially what we would like to have all of our students have or be when they graduate from Pomfret School. It's an ambitious undertaking. 2 weeks from tomorrow, we will see how well we've done with the class of 2018. Some of those won't apply to some of them. Some of them will apply, some of these words will apply to all of them. But it is clearly something we come back to as we're making decisions and as we're thinking about programmatic shifts. The challenge with some of this, and one of the questions that we are coming back to time and again, is how we're measuring what we're doing. Some of what we'll talk about this morning is intensely measurable. It's pretty easy to measure admissions numbers. It's pretty easy to measure college counseling. It's pretty easy to measure some finances. It's a little less easy to measure clarity or resilience or multifaceted learning. Those things aren't easily metriced. We are in conversations as we begin to evaluate the changes that we're making. We have to know more than just anecdotally that what we're doing is working. The metrics are being developed. Some of them are being developed internally, and there's a movement afoot more nationally to try to develop metrics around what we believe are essential skills and competencies for students as they leave both high school and then as they leave college. We are shifting a little bit of our emphasis in the academic realm away from content mastery. In fact, we're shifting quite a bit away from content to focus as much on skills and competencies and mastery, the notion of mastery, and more student agency. Again, some of that is easily metricable, others not so much. But I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. When we set forth on this strategic planning process 5 years ago, this was the vision that we established for the school: to become a recognized leader in learning, teaching, and innovative program design for independent boarding schools. And I think in some very conspicuous ways, we are doing just that. We are getting quite a bit of national attention. It's anecdote, but I think either Jamie Baker, who's the director of the Grauer Institute, or I are getting calls or emails, inquiries from schools on a weekly basis about what we're doing at Pomfret School. This recognition has been really quite validating in some respects, and humbling as well. We've presented in the last couple of years about not just the change process, but about what we're doing at Pomfret, at National Association of Independent Schools, the Association of Boarding Schools, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, the Association of Independent Schools of New England, the Folio Summer Institute, and Jamie actually presented at the Association of the Delaware Valley Independent Schools about what we're doing at Pomfret. So we are getting this type of recognition given the nature of the work that we're doing, and it's been supportive of our vision to be recognized. We're not doing it haphazardly, however. We are being really quite intentional in terms of what we're doing. Every decision we make comes back to mission, vision of the graduate, and then answers to questions that we pose on a regular basis. And I hope you can read those questions. And the answers to these questions evolve, they change. And as they do, we try to be nimble in ways that some schools have really struggled, so that we can meet the needs of students as they're preparing, as our mission says, college, and to lead and learn in a diverse and interconnected global society. So we come back to these questions practically every single day when we're talking about students and student outcomes. And how are we doing this? We've really begun to focus our attention on professional development for faculty. The teachers that we have at the school are an extraordinary bunch, and I think they were an extraordinary bunch when you were students or faculty members here. They are talented, they're dedicated, they are committed, they are intellectual horsepowers, or intellectual powers. They have great capacity for growth. And at the same time, over the last particularly 4 years or so, we have been asking them to reimagine what good teaching and learning looks like. We've asked faculty members, in this sort of cliched sense of being lifelong learners, to become real teacher learners. We've been emphasizing professional development in a way that we haven't before. It was 3 or 4 years ago, for example, we stopped funding master's degrees for our faculty members. Somewhat of a controversial decision, as you might imagine, particularly if you're a young faculty member who wants to get a master's degree. But we weren't seeing, and there isn't any evidence that there's a direct correlation between a master's degree and teaching proficiency. And we moved away from this idea that having a master's degree made you a better shepherd of the classroom experience for students. And we began investing, and part of that came about, and to bore you with one quick detail, we had 6 faculty members, I think it was 4 years ago, who were working on master's degrees, and those 6 people chewed up 90% of our entire professional development budget. 90% for 6 faculty members. And so we sat down and said, and with Jamie's leadership on this, said, why don't we think about ways that would actually, we can suggest, would provide direct evidence and direct training and practice to enhance our teachers' practices, particularly in the classroom, but also work related to diversity. and creativity. And we made a commitment at that time to Project Zero, which you see here. Project Zero Classroom is a program run at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. It's been around for about 50 years. Howard Gardner of Multiple Intelligences, a name you may be familiar with, was one of the co-founders of Project Zero. And we've invested heavily with our faculty in Project Zero. And after this summer, I think it will be in excess of 55 of our faculty members over the last 4 years will have attended Project Zero and gotten training in their deep learning practices. It coincided with our move away from teaching advanced placement classes so that we can focus on deep and sustained learning rather than on the superficial learning opportunities presented with our new schedule with longer block classes that has really shown some extraordinary benefits. We've invested there. We've invested in diversity directions. We've sent almost 30 members of our school community to diversity directions to get training in diversity, multiculturalism, inclusivity. We're talking a lot about cultural competency in the classrooms, and this has been a real boon for them as well. But we've sent faculty members to the Deeper Learning Conference at High Tech High out in San Francisco, the Performance Task Academy, the International Society of Technology Educators. We've sent folks to the Board Design Thinking Institute. We sent 2 summers ago 12 faculty members to the Connecticut Association of Independent Schools Design Thinking Institute. And we have joined, down at the bottom here, you can see we've joined the Mastery Transcript Consortium, and I will try to unpack that a little bit for you in a minute. So our investment in our faculty has been really substantial in trying to get them comfortable with playing a slightly different role in the classroom. And if you go to a classroom today, it will both look physically and feel, in terms of what's going on, it will feel different almost all of the time now from what it looked like 4 or 5 years ago. Much greater degree of student agency, excuse me, much more collaboration, much more movement. I continue to joke that when I was in school, collaboration was called cheating. Excuse me, we're trying to model our classroom experience more on what the world that these students will enter looks like. There's a very well-known educator named Bo Adams who said at a conference I was at, I heard him a few years ago, but he's written about this as well. He said, if school is supposed to prepare students for the real world, why did the real world and school look so different? Why is there so much attention paid to the student as an individual, or the individual isolated in a school environment, where outside of that environment, almost all of the work that young people are doing is collaborative. And so our classrooms look much more collaborative. There's a lot more going on between students with a teacher as facilitator, but not as sort of the pitcher of knowledge being poured into empty student brains. So we've really made a commitment there. Classrooms, again, they look and feel different. We're really focusing on this, on the how of thinking rather than of the what of thinking. I don't want people to be concerned that we're not teaching science anymore, and we're not teaching math or how to write a good sentence or how to speak a foreign language. All of those remain essential components of what we do in the classroom. But they're not the only outcome that we're looking for in the classroom experience. And our assessments now are focused on mastery. We're doing more formative assessment work rather than purely summative assessment work. You see this little picture here. I think that we're going to keep Post-it notes in business. I think the amount of work that's being done there with individual students really collectively thinking about issues in a complex way is actually pretty exciting. I find myself going to classes several times a week. I would like to get into classrooms every single day. Sometimes that's easier than others. And I really see a profound shift in what's going on in classrooms from just a few years ago. This is an empty parking lot in the back of the DuPont library, but you've seen what's out there now. The Helios project, and you see here students who were involved not just in the ideation, but in the design and then construction and implementation of the passive solar aquaponics lab. And if I know some of you had a chance to go out and experience and see what's happening in the aquaponics lab. It really is a great manifestation of the type of learning that we're hoping students are enjoying more and more. That is real hands-on work, addressing issues and problems that are real and relevant to them. This notion of relevant learning has become another buzzword for us. And the excitement that is born of this a particular opportunity is a great symbol of what we're trying to do more broadly at Pomfret. It was we launched this initiative with a grant from the E.E. Ford Foundation, a $50,000 grant, and then we raised the difference in what it would cost from the grant to what we see in operation today. And under Bill Martin, who's our sort of chief biology teacher, the things that are happening there are extraordinary. I missed, evidently, the tilapia fry. I guess we had a tilapia fry last week. The kids, what's that? There are a couple, I guess we kept a couple to show everyone that we actually had grown the tilapia from or something. But we're also providing food from the Helios project to Teague, to a local food pantry, and to the school. So it's been an extraordinary outgrowth of this idea of new ways of thinking. So look vaguely familiar to some? That's so sad. It's so sad. Yeah, this is, I really love this. It's pointing directly. This poor young person here is about to be called out in a horrifying way, and this guy's really happy it's not him. So classrooms of the past, I think, people nicely in rows listening to a teacher who is literally dictating what they need to know. And I hope that you'll see that what's going on now is really something quite different. Oh. So, what's that? You got it. So needless to say, I had nothing to do with that. I couldn't have done that in my wildest dreams. I asked Alexandra not too long ago if she wouldn't mind wandering around to some classrooms. She had no other direction. Just take some video of what's going on in classrooms that I can show to the alumni body. And we got this the day before yesterday. Gave it a thumbs up and said, okay, here it is. So not a whole lot of editorial control put in. But I hope you get a sense from Alexandra's work. But obviously that work was done in one of our digital arts classes. That what's going on looks and feels a little bit different. And it's been really affirming. So shifting a little bit, trying to shift a little bit. There we go. I'll let you read this. These words are the fourth from the fourth pillar of the strategic plan. If there's something that we are focusing as much on as the academic program for our students, it's the financial strength of the school. Trying to address an environment that has become incredibly competitive on an admissions front. And as you know, or if you're not aware, our tuition next year will be over $61,000. That's a big number. And what that means is that next year we'll have an even smaller number of people who can afford to come to Pomfret, domestic students anyway, without financial aid. We are doing exceptional things on a very, very lean budget. Many of you here will remember our previous CFO, Arthur Diaz, class of 78, I think, who I hope and believe will be around tonight. He left a few years ago. We were very fortunate to hire our new CFO, Ed Griffin, who came to us after 12 years down at Choate, to help us navigate what are increasingly and fairly increasingly complex waters. And I just want to share with you a little bit about some of the complications around what's happening in the world of numbers. The admissions landscape is incredibly competitive. Never has it been more competitive. Really easy for students to apply to multiple schools simultaneously. We're finding that on average, and Amy Graham, who's our Director of Enrollment Management, can correct me, students who we accept at Pomfret are typically holding 6 or 7 other acceptances from really good independent boarding schools. And so we are, and they're good schools that we're competing against. Some of them with very flashy buildings. I would put our program, what we're doing programmatically and academically, up against any of them. But if for a young, naive scientist who comes to Pomfret and who goes to one of our peer schools with a brand new $30 million science building, it's a tough road to hoe with that particular individual. But it's increasingly competitive. The Association of Boarding Schools is our parent organization. NABI is a, I'm not even sure what to call it. It's a program. It stands for the North American Boarding Initiative. And the goal of NABI, which is being run by TABS, is to increase by the year 2020, to increase the number of high or full pay domestic applicants to boarding schools by 2,020 new students by the year 2020. It doesn't sound like very much, but it's important to keep in mind there are only 250 boarding schools or so in the US, and about 210 of those are high schools. So if we could increase by 2,000 the number of full pay or high pay domestic students applying to these schools, it would be a significant benefit for us. There is a massive advertising campaign, an extraordinary deep dive in terms of data and research that the Association of Boarding Schools has been doing in NABI to try to uncover where those markets are. They have identified 250,000 people in the US and Canada who are candidates for this high or full pay domestic boarding market. Half of those, 125,000 of those students or families currently attend public schools. And in their research, bless you, the favorability ratings for boarding schools is on about the same level as the favorability ratings for prisons. And that's, I can't even say that with a smile on my face. We are not looked at very favorably across the US. And so NABI and TABS are doing some really, I think, really neat work in the advertising world to try to change that image. And if you go online and you go to readyformore.com, I think it is, you will see some of what they've put together to try to move the market in our direction. The good news is that our inquiries are up. We had an increase in the number of applications to Pomfret School this year, and an increase in the number of domestic full pay applicants to Pomfret this year. But we're not unique there. We had incredibly strong revisit days. I believe that we yielded 56% of the students who came back for a second visit. That is really high. When people come back for a second look and they're choosing between 6 or 7 schools, when we can yield 56% of those, we're doing very well. And we are attracting great kids. We are attracting terrific kids from all over the world. I've said to this crowd before, we could fill every single bed at Pomfret School with a full pay and highly qualified Chinese student. We could eliminate all of our financial woes if we just became a Chinese boarding school in Pomfret, Connecticut. That may not be what we or the Chinese families want, and certainly would create more problems than it would solve. 2 years ago, we had 250 applications from China. We accepted 5 of those students. So we are really strongly pursuing the full pay domestic boarding market, but so too are every one of our peers. So we're working hard. Amy has done some exceptional work with her team to realign their responsibilities and to try to get us into some new markets. We still have a little bit of work to do to fill beds for next year, but we're slightly ahead of where we were last year at this time. The mythical date of April 10th, when all schools sort of close their admission offices, that's so far deep in the boarding school history. I don't think there's probably one school. I think the Kate School in California. I think they're probably done on April 10th, but they I think are alone. So we're still doing great work there. I reckon that probably not everyone on this. Can you see this all right? This slide? Yeah, you're good. Just looking at our income, you can see that we are a heavily tuition-dependent school. We've been a tuition-dependent school for some time, but we are, it's been a fairly steady number, right around 75 or 76%. Our annual giving continues to be a source of great pride for us. In our small peer group, we are doing very well on this front. Our endowment draw is roughly, I think, 1.93 million this year, Ed, making up about 9% of our income, although that is going to have a little bit of an asterisk next to it, in that moving forward, we are trying to be very disciplined, and we're going to bring our endowment draw down to try for long-term benefits. And then we have other revenue comes from a handful of different sources. It's rink rentals and fees from summer programs who pay to be here and the like. So you look at this chart and you compare it here to our expenses, and the happy news coming out of all of this is that we have a balanced budget. And if you have any questions about this, I am certainly happy. The educational is faculty and staff salaries, department budgets, athletics. The plant deferred and current plant maintenance. Institutional are benefits, health and pension and auxiliary programs, some of our summer work, the tuck shop, the school store. Administrative is everything that comes out of my office, the business office, admissions, advancement, and communications. That's a pretty big nut. And then student support is food services, senior admin, college counseling, health center, and the collaborative learning center. So it's a tight budget, but we remain a balanced budget. We presented a balanced budget to the board at our April meeting and got approved. And so you can see where the coming in and the going out are. Kind of a graphic-heavy slide, but when you compare where we are to our peers, you can see what's happened over the last 8 years. Peers, Pomfret's here and here. The thing we're quite pleased about is that in 2011, we were the third most expensive boarding school in New England out of the 40 ABOP schools, and we are now the 20th, which is a kind of cold comfort when that's the number that gets you to 20th place. But we believe that long term, over the really long term, this commitment to discipline with respect to tuition increases, and you can see here, that's the average of our tuition increases over the last 8 years, that we're being the little engine that could, because a lot of these schools are significantly better endowed than we are. So our increase this year for boarding, 2.7%, was significantly lower than our peers. The question that can naturally be asked is, are you leaving money on the table? The very, very easy answer is yes, but there's a reason why we're doing that. So if we can stay committed to maintaining a balanced budget while also keeping our tuition increases low, in time we believe that it will be a very, very positive thing for Pomfret School. Again, a little heavy here. When we talk about endowment, we're talking about how we're working. It comes from gifts, it comes from return, and it comes from our spending. And I mentioned here that the board approved this year. You see, it's going to be short-term pain. That difference of 0.25% is about $110,000 of operating budget or operating expenses that we lose by making that shift. So we have to be very frugal and fiscally responsible when we're making this commitment. But we have, over the past couple of years, it was I think 3 years ago, we put all of our debt service into our operating budget so that we weren't pulling debt out of our endowment anymore. Again, a really positive move from the school. And we are doing everything in our power, and everything in our power so far recently has been that we've been very disciplined in not borrowing from endowment. When we were building the Health and Wellness Center, which you see going up, it's a fully funded building before we put a shovel in the ground. So 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, we changed our endowment management. We were managing the endowment internally with a group of members of the board who were in charge of that. They were obviously very committed to the work they were doing, but they were doing that management piece as a part-time job, kind of like a hobby. The board decided that it would be more prudent if we hired an investment firm, a money management firm, to do that. And so we've been working for, I think now, 3 years with LVW Advisors from New York City. They've made some adjustments to some of our investments. We still have a few legacy investments that we're in time hopefully going to shift, but you can see that our returns, which have been really quite substandard over the previous 7 or 8 years, have now caught up at least to the ABOP's average. So we're pleased with that movement. In terms of our overall position, you can see I've already put this up here. 76% of our revenue comes from tuition. The upside of this is that despite this, we are an incredibly fiscally responsible school. We're one of the lower in terms of our peer group's average in terms of cost per student, and well below the ABOP's cost per student. We run a lean operation. There isn't a lot, despite the fact that we have programs growing and we've added some positions. We've remained disciplined in our overall spending approach so that we can have a balanced budget still on an endowment that's just shy of $48 million. So I think it was $47.8 million as of yesterday or the day before. So a little bit below our peer average, and the ABOPS average is rather quite stunning. That's thrown a little bit off by a handful of schools who are have over $1 million of endowment per student. I think Exeter's endowment is now up to over $1.5 billion. So they have that going for them. FA, and we can talk more about financial. I can have Amy talk more about financial aid. Financial aid remains one of our great commitments as we move forward. We are using our financial aid budget, I think, quite wisely, but as we see shrinking pools of people who can afford full boat tuition, our financial aid package, or the amount we have allotted to financial aid, has remained largely steady. There have been small increases, but certainly not increases that would keep up substantially with the difference between CPI and tuition increases. And as that gap between the CPI curve and tuition continues to grow, we need to increase, if we're going to remain vibrant and diverse and eclectic community, we need to make a commitment to increasing our full pay, our financial aid budget. So there are affordability concerns. I was talking to someone last night, and these numbers are kind of rough, but when the class of 68 attended Pomfret, it was somewhere between 35 and probably 45% of families in the U.S. for a year without, somewhere between 35 and 45%. In 2018, 1.5%. As that number has diminished significantly, schools have had to contribute and have had to think much more intentionally about how they're using financial aid to enroll students. And again, there are a couple of schools who are need blind or effectively need blind. Pomfret's not one of them, and I don't anticipate that unless someone in this room is going to stroke a 9-figure gift. Anyone? Figure gift over the next few years, that's unlikely to happen. So we have work to do in terms of faculty is as good as it gets. I believe that the teachers we have here are more committed and more talented than any group that I've ever worked with. And I say that without hyperbole, and I say it with great humility. And yet, relative to our peers, we are paying them less. And the answer to the question that I was asked recently by the board, do we lose faculty members to schools who are paying them more? The answer is yes, not many, but the answer is yes. We have 1 or 2 faculty members who are leaving in any given year because they can get paid between $5,000 and $10,000 more at another school to do effectively the same work, and in some cases to do even less work. So we are, this has become a commitment for us as we move forward with planning for our future. So this idea of doing more with less is both admirable, but it's also necessary. It's inevitable. The extraordinary program that we've developed and all of the amazing things that are happening at Pomfret are happening because we've committed to doing them as responsibly as we can. And so there's our house, which is neat. And I just remembered why a picture of our house is up there. Our house is up there. This is our old house. This is our new house. Everyone heard about the fire. We had a fire in the house. So we had been talking before that about whether we needed new dormitory space. We shifted our ratio of day students to boarders. When I arrived, it was 25% day students. And we are currently at 15% day students, so 85% of our students are boarders. And that was a conscious choice that we made for a number of reasons, but it also made our kind of crowded. So we're like, okay, so we have more and more boarding students. Well, we don't have more and more dorms. We've added some spaces. But then the fire happened, and there certainly, as you may have read, was a silver lining to it, in that the house right next door, we went over and knocked on their door and said, "How about selling your house to us?" Sure, that sounds great. So we had a house, and then we had space for a dorm for 17 people. And the fact that there are 17 people, a faculty family and their dog living alone, suggested that we had more space than we needed, and it's made a brilliant dorm, and the total cost of that was $700,000. If we had built from scratch a dorm for 17 students, it would have been somewhere around $3 million. So doing more with less. We've taken this approach in the dining hall as well. We saw a need for some dining hall upgrades 2 years ago. This is the old dining hall. And we, in the master planning process that we went through, we estimated that the renovation that we had envisioned was going to cost just north of $2 million to improve the servery, to make the space sort of bigger and more useful. Instead, we opened up walls, we completely redid the servery, and again, the initial forecasted cost for a renovated, not gut renovated, but renovated dining hall was about $2 million, between $2 and $2.5 million. And with working together with Flick, our food service company, we accomplished, and I don't know if you've been over to see the dining hall, but it's terrific. New pizza oven, pizza hearth, much better improved servery, better food offerings, bigger salad bar, a conveyor belt tray disposal system. We got that for about $300,000 rather than $2 million. Trying to do more with less. Our classrooms, when we did the same master planning process, same number keeps coming up. We estimated that it would cost about $2.5 million. We were looking for, but instead of knocking down walls or building new buildings or doing completely gut renovation that would have cost $2 to $2.5 million, for 10% of that, for about $250,000, we were able to renovate all of the classrooms. So this is the old soft auditorium with a stage, not very practical, not very useful. It's become multi-function space today. The Collaborative Learning Center on the second floor of the library, for a very, very small dollar figure, we were able to turn the library from a rather traditional space with stacks into a collaborative learning center, which has caused library usage to triple in the last 2 years. This mindset of trying to accomplish our goals, significant goals, but to do so with an eye toward fiscal responsibility has paid real dividends for us over the last few years. It's also been possible because we're on a pretty good run of fundraising, and with great credit to Melissa Balanzo and the advancement team. You can see what's been happening. Pretty good trends, a little bit down here in 2017. We attribute that partially to the investigation that we were doing into the school's history with sexual misconduct. Every school who has done that has seen a similar issue with giving in the year that followed the investigation. But you see here in 2018, you see that we're back heading very, very positively in a direction that we would like to continue to go. Our goal, annual fund goal this year, $2.5 million. We're hoping that we'll take a good chunk out of that on Monday with the Day of Giving. So kudos to Melissa and her team. Moving forward, as we move toward the 125th, we've established with the board some very specific fundraising priorities, and you can see them outlined there. You see 2 of those have been accomplished. The Health and Wellness Center, which will open in September, is fully funded at about $4 million. The Grauer Institute is fully funded at about $5 million, just north of $5 million. And then we've established these other priorities as goals for our strategic fundraising priorities over the next about the next 5 years. The science building renovation, it's going to be our plan. Our hope is to have that be a gut renovation and expansion of space, not just a renovation of the space. Oh, look, a car. So this, you've seen this car. Everyone seen the car? Greg, where are you? Susan, where are you? Greg and Susan. Greg Melville and his wife Susan Fox, Greg, class of 68, who's also a member of our board of trustees, to facilitate or drum up some energy for our Day of Giving on Monday, have donated this extraordinarily beautiful Mazda sports car for us to the MX-5. I'm a sports car guy, to have sort of auctioned off. Not auctioned per se, but for every $100 you spend supporting Pomfret on Monday on the Day of Giving, you will get an entry into a drawing to win this car. $300 gets you 3 entries. It's pretty worthwhile. Good-looking vehicle. Great birthday present for one of your children. Or me. So the goal is to get 680 donations on Monday. That's a tribute to the class of 1968. And if we could close out annual fund on Monday with this would be very exciting. Very, very exciting. And so we thank Greg and we thank Susan. Yes, sir.
To say it's a bit of a nod to 68 for our efforts to move vehicles into the dining room on at least a couple of occasions.
I'm glad there are no students here. So just a quick anecdote. At our trustee meeting, we had a student life meeting, and a handful of students came to this meeting a few weeks ago. And they were talking about a tradition that we'd taken away that none of you know because it didn't exist when you were here. It was around for about 8 years. In any case, some very thoughtful board members started asking them which traditions were still alive. And was this one still alive? Do you still do this? And I was like, no, stop talking. Stop giving them ideas. And there were some really bad ideas. So the seniors pulled off their first prank and only damaged Centennial Schoolhouse to the tune of about $4,000. I was like, thank you, trustees. That was awesome. So Day of Giving on Monday continues to help us in our pursuit. And as Laura earlier referenced, the 125, which begins really in earnest as soon as this school year is over. It's actually well underway. Should be a really, really exciting time for the school. And though you're back for a reunion this year, I certainly hope that we'll see you back next year. So how am I doing for time? Pretty well. Doing pretty well. My 4-hour presentation is now officially done, and I would be happy to take questions. I'm also very fortunate in that we have some members of the board, and I have my whole senior administrative team here who can may be able to help with any specific questions you have. Yes?
You mentioned just a moment ago the sexual history investigation.
Yes.
Could you fill us in a little about that?
So we sent a letter to all of you 2 years ago that synthesized what the school had done in terms of an investigation. We hired a firm, a Connecticut firm, law firm to do an investigation. A guy named Jim Sconzo did the investigation over several months. He interviewed past students and faculty members and then wrote a report discussing what his findings were, and then we shared that report publicly with all of our alumni and all of our parents. And if you didn't get that letter, we're happy to share it with you. Yes?
What was the thinking in increasing the percentage of boarding students from
Really two things, and it was pretty simple. The first was sort of at the time a growing and I still think it exists, a growing interest in the day student population to be more integrated into the life of the school. We have been making steps, and I know that Brad made some great steps when he was here to make day students more incorporated into the life of the school. There's a portion, however, portion of that experience that's not accessible to day students, and that is the actual residential component, the evenings, and then the overnight time. So that was part of it. And the second was a financial decision. There's a $20,000 delta between a day student and a boarding student. So if you can shift 10%, which is of that, it was a roughly $200,000 to $300,000, assuming you could find full pay domestic boarders. There was a bottom line benefit to a programmatic enhancement. Yes.
On the expense pie chart, there was a certain expense for servicing of debt, and what does the school go into debt for, and how do they get themselves out of that?
Well, we went into debt for a couple of reasons, and there was some building projects. About half of it was the process of switching from oil to natural gas. That's about $8 million amortized over 40 years, I think, 30 years. But there was some past debt, so we rolled all of our past debt into a single, we have a single now mechanism for all of our debt. And in total debt's about just north of $16 million. So some for turf fields, some for the gas line project. And Ed, anything else that you can mention?
Yeah, it's for the turf fields, the gas line, and then prior, long accumulated deferred maintenance items. And so we put it into our operating budget every year now. So it's not drawing down off of endowment. Yes.
When you were speaking of the evolution of the classroom setup and how children are being taught and, I guess, facilitated to teach themselves in a lot of ways, has that been spread out to any of the local elementary schools to kind of entice them to come here and give them some idea of how, or give the schools some idea how they may prepare students a little more for doing that in the elementary school, so that they have a little less of an adjustment to make?
So it's an interesting question, and Amy may be able to tackle it a little bit. One thing I will say, it's interesting, is that a lot of the things that we're doing programmatically in the classroom, it's been really safe for progressive, thoughtful middle schools to do that. What I mean by that is it's when we make radical is too strong a word. When we make a pronounced change to how we do learning in the classroom, there's a risk to prospective buyers, that colleges aren't going to like this, right? For good middle schools, they've been doing what we're doing forever. My wife, who just left, was a fourth grade teacher for 24 years. Or 23 years, and she did collaborative, student-driven learning that whole time, but way before it could trickle up to high school. Parents love innovative education until their kids get to high school, and then they want math, science, English, history, foreign language, so that Johnny or Susie can go to the right college. What we're finding, and I think what we will find increasingly, is that colleges, and this is where I can actually come back to the Mastery Transcript and the Mastery Transcript Consortium, can look at students in a different way. So the Mastery Transcript Consortium, which was the brainchild of a guy named Scott Looney at the Hawkins School, began with Scott's vision that the transcript that we're sending to colleges tells a terribly inadequate story about students. and that A's and B's and C's and D's don't differentiate. They don't actually provide colleges with anything useful about a student. And the Mastery Transcript Consortium's goal, and there are now, Jamie, 200 school? 175 schools, public and private, who have signed on to be part of the Mastery Transcript Consortium. Pomfret was one of the early adopters, but there a lot of the really sort of the big dogs in independent schools have joined this consortium. The idea is is to focus on mastery, and mostly mastery of skills. So how's your critical thinking? How are your communication skills? Can you solve complex problems? And the idea, roughly, very loosely speaking, is actually to use something that looks like this, a pie chart that would have something like grit or resilience as one of the slices of pie. How gritty, how resilient has this student been? How effectively do they communicate in writing or orally? And then schools will develop their own metrics for how to measure this, but effectively it will become a pie chart of skills and competencies and less grade driven. I also think that if it's not going to spell the death knell of standardized tests, it's certainly going to contribute to its demise. We, for the first time, as far as Bruce Willandon, who's our director of college counseling, for the first time in his memory, we are sending a student to college next year who did not take a single standardized test. No ACT, no SAT, no SAT subject test, no APs. And she got an early decision to her first choice, obviously, an early decision. Trinity College. Fully 25% of colleges in America no longer require standardized tests. Why is that? Well, because there's real question about the correlation between performance on standardized tests and performance in college and beyond college. Although there's mixed research. Yes?
For this mastery transcript, it used to be easy to know how you could improve your grades. You studied harder, you did better in the next exam, and so forth. Are you teaching these skills, and
yeah.
How does the student, does he see his growing transcript, and
yes.
How does he find out, he or she, find out how to improve communication skills?
So there will continue to be the overlap, right, with discipline-specific undertakings. So we will use mathematics as a vehicle for, instead of math to its own end, as a delivery mechanism for complex problem solving. So we'll still have kids taking calculus. We'll still have kids taking advanced physics. But the goal won't be to won't be exclusively just to master a bunch of physics or a bunch of math. It will be to learn how to approach problems, learn how to develop questions, learn how to support a thesis that you've developed for yourself. Jamie, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think it's easiest to understand if you think about if you were ever been coached in a sport and you're working on your move your weight this way, transfer this way, and that feedback, you get it in between every practice shot that you're making. We want to create academic opportunities, for example, for oral communication, where you perform the task of communicating in front of a group orally with eye contact and body language and projection
Yes.
Almost like a miniature PhD where you present, I mean, you're teaching the skill set that is required of people to do a PhD, like don't they have to not only investigate all the facts, but they have to know how to present it?
It could be considered that. What I hear you saying is that I think you can imagine it as traditional education being very one-dimensional, meaning what you know. But now we're talking multi-dimensional, but what you know in deep discipline content knowledge, say in physics, what's curious questions you're interested in researching and learning about, and then what can you do with what you know. So that's much more multi, and then how can you communicate all of those things to any sort of audience, whether it's a technical audience or a lay audience, you have to completely change your language usage. So we have always talked about the whole student, but this is the whole student on steroids, because you're getting down into the individual skills and all of the individual discriminant parts of those skills that have to stack up to its masters.
I have a 10-year-old son in the 5th grade, and that's why I'm looking forward in the next 3 to 5 years, whether, this is the direction he wants to go in, or how to make sure that he has some understanding of the skills expected of him outside of what he's getting taught in PCS.
Sure. Yep.
Are other independent schools exploring these same pedagogical and learning style changes, or often significantly ahead of them?
We are ahead of the pack, I'm proud to say, for boarding schools. And again, there are some day schools in pockets across the country who have been doing this for 10 or 15 years. One of the, again, it's purely anecdote, but when I went to Project Zero, which was 3 summers ago, 400 people, 400 educators at Harvard for 6 pretty intense days. People from all over the world. But I think we were the only boarding school with any representation there, which is so far beyond puzzling that I don't understand it. Most boarding schools are within a stone's throw of this program. In terms of the rapidity of change, the pace of change, we have outpaced our peers somewhat significantly, which is in part why we're getting the phone calls, and in part why we're being asked to speak at conferences. It hasn't been easy. We're asking zebras to change their stripes in some cases with respect to our enormously talented teachers, some of whom have been doing things very successfully and very well for 30 or 35 years, and we're saying, yeah, well, that's great, but that's what it used to be, and you need to hop on board. So I give them great credit. Yep, and then here.
Any quantitative evidence at this point that the progressive education that you're doing has improved either your SAT or PSAT? So you still got 75 to 80% of your colleges that are demanding that type of score. So this time, have you been able to collaborate and find out if you've made progress in those areas?
Well, so we can look at our SATs have remained fairly stable. But the point of our changes haven't been to improve SAT scores, right? The point of the exercise is to lead to skill and competency development that will serve them beyond a sit-down standardized test. Our kids are going to, because we're always going to teach, at least students will take at least through Algebra 2. They're going to be able to perform adequately on the math SAT because we're doing, a lot of writing and a great deal of reading. They're going to perform adequately there, but that's not going to be our focal point. We have begun investigating other measurement techniques. There's an assessment that we give every year to freshmen and juniors called the CWRA, the College Work and Readiness Assessment, which tests critical thinking, complex problem solving, written communication, and so it's too early to say. We only have anecdotal evidence there. This is a process that will take 3 to 5 years anyway before we can start metricing it, and the real value is going to be for not just our current students, but what's happening with them in college, and then even more importantly, how are they doing after college? How did, this change from the singularity of educational experience that is a completely autonomous process or undertaking to a more collaborative process? How's that helping students when they go out into the real world? Our middle child works at Bloomberg in New York, and everything she does is on a team. Everything. She does virtually nothing by herself. And so, I've spoken to her a little bit about how, and she was at another boarding school, the school we were at before, that was still using a largely autonomous student, you do the work and then you get assessed by yourself approach. And she said, I don't think that high school really prepared me very well for this. And I'm hoping and believing that what we're doing will have long-term benefits for students. And I believe, too, we have one child in college, and she has some mixture of more collaborative work and still some very independent work. So I'm hopeful that the work that we're doing in time, we will be able to show something really quite quantitative. But right now, it's just too early in the process. Yes.
In the mission statement, it said that your goal is to prepare people in mind, body, and spirit. That's a fairly traditional trinity. What do you mean by spirit?
That's a great and very fair question. We do this we do it in chapel, and we do it through ripples throughout our program in advisory. We do it in our religion requirements. We're having students explore, certainly academically and in chapel. So we have 2 chapel services a week. One of them is senior chapel talks. Hard to argue that those are purely spiritual talks, and that's a spiritual experience. We believe that in being in chapel, in listening to the words that Bobby Fischer shares, in spending time in silence, in exploring some spiritual topics in some of our academic courses. Bobby teaches a course currently that is modeled on one of the most popular courses at Yale University, the Happiness Project, which explores happiness and spirituality. So it's a little bit different. That part of the mission is a very old part of the mission, and certainly I think a holdover from when some folks were attending multiple, and I think 5-6 days a week, attending a traditional high Episcopalian service. We do not impart that part of the mission through that vehicle anymore. More, it's on an interpersonal level. Some in chapel, clearly. If you were in chapel today, you heard Bobby. So the remarks Bobby gave today on saints, that would be about a typical Friday presentation from him, asking people to consider concepts related to spirituality. But I think, and someone can or probably will correct me, I think it was Mr. Twitchell who was the first person to say, I think we want to become more open and more inclusive here, and not have a single directed theology. It's complicated in our world. We have students coming in who are practicing less religion. I mean, that's a phenomenon that's going on all over at least all over our country. And so I'm afraid I haven't provided perhaps as clear an answer as your question deserves, but we are still intentionally focused on the full well-being of the whole child. Yes?
It's a comment and more than a question. How far we've come since 1950, when Pomfret showed its flexibility in English class when we were supposed to be reading Art of Darkness. But the bookseller made a mistake and sent us Darkness at Noon. And Pomfret survived because Pomfret's very flexible.
Glad to, and we're still teaching Heart of Darkness, by the way. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. One more question, yes.
As you move into the new educational experience and preparation for college, are you changing your algorithm for acceptance of students, and how are you doing that relationship, getting away maybe from the SST
I am going to immediately punt the question to our Director of Enrollment Management, Amy Graham. Amy's in her second year with Pomfret, and that's a terrific, if difficult, question to answer.
It is. So really, we've had a standard rubric that has been fairly consistent for the last decade. The SSAT is still the universal test for incoming students to boarding schools. We will not get rid of it, but the process, not as a weight that we would say you need to get this score or you're in the rejection pile, you need to get this score and automatically make a second pile. So we do keep that as part of the application process, but as Tim was saying, the skills that we're looking for in students, resilience, a willingness to learn, a curiosity, engagement, that comes out in the whole application. Through the interview process, teacher recommendations that we receive on that student, their overall transcript. As Tim has touched on, transcripts are changing. As an admissions officer, our team really appreciates the narrative transcripts we get from most middle schools these days that will talk about the growth a child has experienced from grade 6 to grade 8 or grade 9. That gives us much more insight into a student's academic ability and their ability to contribute to our community, more so than an A, a B, a C. As you can imagine, we're getting students from all over the world and all over the country. There's a certain amount of leveling that needs to happen when we bring in students in grade 9 and grade 10. So the more that we can learn about that child, the more that we can assess whether their preparedness for conference and our academic career.
That takes us into lunchtime. It is 12:33. Lunch started 3 minutes ago. I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm around all day and this evening and welcome any questions that you may have in person. But thanks so much for coming and have a great afternoon.